Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of this amendment, which I filed, and to ask through you for the member's support. This amendment would put into place permanent voter registration in our state of Massachusetts, and I've offered this amendment specifically as a part of this budget debate because it is a savings generator for both our cities and towns and for the Commonwealth itself. This amendment would require the Secretary of the Commonwealth to use available data from the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles and also from the U.S. Postal Service to update our statewide voter registration data. And according to the Brennan Center for Justice, which is a nationally recognized nonpartisan public policy institute, as many as 1 in every 6 Americans changes their address within a year. So as a result, in order to be able to vote in their new neighborhood, residents must re-register to vote at their new address. This is something that's common sense to us, but is really not common knowledge among many Massachusetts residents. And I myself, at the polls oftentimes have encountered voters who are surprised and frustrated to learn that they are not able to vote because even if they've just moved, a few blocks over into a new voting location. And over time, the re-registry process that this requires adds quite a lot of cost to the budgets of local election offices in city, towns, and clerks. The Caltech and MIT Voting Technology Project estimates that up to roughly a third of the budgets of local election offices across the country are made up by the cost of processing voter registrations. And in other states, again, according to the Pew Center on the states, the act of simply creating a new record or updating an existing one can cost upward of $7 per record, which when you, of course, multiply that over hundreds and thousands of voters can really add up. So here's how this amendment would work to save both our state and our cities and towns money. The Massachusetts RMV and the U.S. Postal Service would provide to the Secretary of the Commonwealth on a quarterly basis data on residents who have recently moved or changed their address within Massachusetts. And then once that data is confirmed to be a match with a voter that is already on our statewide voter list in Massachusetts, the Secretary of the Commonwealth would update that voter's record with the new address information in the Central Voter Registry and also notify the appropriate registrars in the old city and town and the new city and town where that resident has moved to. Amendment 30 represents several benefits to the Commonwealth. First, of course, it would increase electoral participation. Research indicates that states with permanent voter registration systems typically have higher voter turnout rates. And then second, it would streamline that process that I just described and save cities and towns money by reducing the volume of printed voter registration cards that they need to use and print. It would decrease the cost to cities and towns for very costly, labor-intensive manual data entry to input and update voter records. It would reduce the mailing costs for the state, which are incurred when voter registration cards are sent to the Secretary of the Commonwealth, who then has to mail those cards to the appropriate city and town registrar's offices. And lastly, and most significantly, of course, and I know this is a matter of concern to several of our members in the chamber, permanent voter registration would make Massachusetts voter files more accurate. So for all of those reasons, I hope that you will vote yes on this amendment. Thank you.
Senator from Plymouth and Norfolk, Mr. Hedlund.
Thank you, Madam President. I think if there's one amendment that we've discussed thus far in these proceedings that really should warrant a public hearing and a vetting by the appropriate committee, this is probably it. There are a lot of questions associated with this proposal that should be heard at the committee level. We hope the amendment is not adopted. The questions that I think warrant some scrutiny from the appropriate committee, which would be election laws or its successor, I'm not sure of the name these days, but this is something that we have concerns about costs. I know the sponsor talked a little bit about costs, but what would be the impacts to local communities that would be required to comply with the kind of paperwork requirements that are necessary, but more importantly, the cost to the Registry of Motor Vehicles. It seems there'll be an additional level of paperwork associated with this from their perspective, also the Secretary of State. Has the Secretary of State, the Chief Election Laws Officer of the Commonwealth, weighed in on this proposal? has the Registry of Motor Vehicles provided us any input on this proposal? It seems to me that we have made great strides in recent years, over maybe the last decade, in making one's ability to register to vote much easier, more accessible to citizens to do so. It wasn't that long ago, I can recall, you had to visit your own town hall. Then we made changes and you can visit any town hall. Then we made changes that you could simply do it when you register your car or go to, get a license. Now we have different drives that allow you to register by mail. It seems as though the process is fairly easy now, and this raises, I think, too many questions, or certainly questions of cost that we have, and also the question of whether or not this is inconsistent with some existing law that we have that provides for voter registration to be done at the municipal level by each municipality. It doesn't account for how to process potential duplicates and how does one determine that the Registry of Motor Vehicles and the voter record are the same person, for instance. There are instances, we know that two voters have the same name and the same date of birth. So we run into those problems. And I would think, if you look at the language of this proposal, that there are going to be additional staffing requirements at the Secretary of State's office to administer this and perform the matches and send the notices. And it seems to me there's some additional costs to the Commonwealth that we have not addressed to this point. So we hope that the amendment is not adopted.
Ms. Chang-Diaz.
I want to address some of the very legitimate, great questions that the gentleman from from Weymouth raised. First of all, just to be very clear, this would not incur any additional costs for the Commonwealth. We're talking about data that is already collected, that already exists within the data sets that are within the possession of the RMV and the U.S. Postal Service. So there's no need for additional data collection here. It's simply sharing that data from the RMV and the Postal Service to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office. In terms of personnel that it would require, I think it will be intuitive to the members that the amount of personnel that it would require to do a data match among 2 or 3 data sets will be minimal, and certainly pales in comparison to the personnel and hours required to do manual data entry at 351 municipalities across the state. So just want to be very clear about the cost and savings. This would very clearly be a net savings generator for the state and for our municipalities. And with respect to how could we be certain that the data produces a reliable match, just to give folks a sense of exactly how this would work, the data that would be provided to the Secretary of the Commonwealth in this process would include name, current address, both the address where the registrant is currently living, the mailing address, the date of birth, an identification number from a driver's license or the last 4 digits of a Social Security number, telephone number, date, time, and nature of the last change of the information. So there's a lot of accompanying information here that could ensure us that it would be a solid match. And this would not be a match based simply upon a match of first and last name, which of course would not be reliable enough to change someone's registration.